What questions do men fear to be asked by a woman?
I love it.
I know, I love the dramatic title. Thank you so much for joining us today on Second Act TV. Once again, I want to welcome back Robert Manni, the author of The Guys Guide to Love and host of Guys Radio and TV right here on YouTube. Robert, thanks for being here again.
My pleasure. Hope we can help out again today.
I think we can. This again is right up your alley. What questions do men fear to be asked by a woman?
I love it.
I know, I love the dramatic titles. What's really uncomfortable? What do men not want to answer? And I think some of these might be right on. Some of them might surprise you. So, do you agree that there are questions that men, really fear about, or don't want to have to answer?
Well, as you know, I think a lot of times guys like to play it close to the vest and they don't like to express their feelings because nowadays, if you're a guy, if you don't say anything, you're not emotionally available. And if you do say something, you're like you get the finger wagged at you sometimes because you're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Well, let's look at the questions. Let's look at the questions that this particular expert said that men do not wish to be asked, that this can instill some fear. So the first one is, are we exclusive? That anything about exclusivity can up the fear factor. What do you think?
I think it's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
And I think it all comes down to the timing. Now, if you've gone on 2 dates, are we exclusive? It's a little bit premature. That said, when I met my wife, we were on Match. We were both on Match. She had a free trial. She winked at me. We got together. We went out a few times and she said, "Are you still on Match?" I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "Why? Why don't we just date each other? And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't." And I thought about it and I said, well, maybe that's a better idea than like dating all these people and spreading myself so thin. And I said, okay, I'll try it. Now here we are. We're married over a decade. So the idea of being exclusive has its advantages, even early on, where there's not as much confusion. You can just focus on the one person and the relationship and say, can we make this a go? And if it doesn't work, you can get out of it just as quickly. So it's actually not a bad question, but I think that it needs to be asked at the proper time. You might not like the answer if you ask it too early.
No, you're absolutely right. It's funny because I told Paul I was doing this segment because there's a question in here. I'll point it out when we get to it. But I said, oh my God, this is going to be great. Your questions that men fear. And he goes, oh, I bet what's on there. I know what's on there. Because like, where's this going? I said, well, you're right. It's, exclusive. But they actually say, is saying something like, well, what are we? Or just toning it down a little bit versus being, well, are we exclusive? That to your point, the environment matters and how the question is asked, but it is absolutely a valid question, especially if you're having sex. The next one, this is interesting too. What's your ex like? Anything about an ex, or for that matter, ex-girlfriends, not necessarily an ex-wife, can really trigger jealousy. So is that something that we really need to know? Do men fear this?
Well, I think men would be concerned about that because you want to know, I believe, what's behind that question. Why do you want to know what my ex is like? Do you want to know things I might admit about myself in our relationship? If I say great things about her, does that put the person who asked the question on the spot then, feeling insecure? If I trash my ex, does that make me a bad guy because you don't want to say negative things about other women? Do you want to be honest about it? It's a loaded question for sure. And I would push back. I'd say, why would you like to know? Because I don't really want to know about my exes, my girlfriend's exes. I don't want to know.
I agree.
Why would a woman want to know? Why?
Sheer curiosity. I can answer that because
Please.
I want to know, but I don't want to know. It's
Right.
one of those so you have this back here wondering, but then you really don't want to know. It's silly. I mean, it's silly, but I totally identify with that. And it's a question that usually leads to tension or some sort of conflict or thinking, making stuff up in your head unnecessarily. So
Maybe there's a specific reason. If there's a specific reason, maybe ask that specific question. But Otherwise, I think the truth will come out. If you want to get some information on the ex, if you're going to be with somebody over a period of time, they have a history.
Right,
So there's going to be a backstory in the every story, right? It's going to
right,
come out at a certain
right,
point anyhow.
right.
So I don't think you need to ask unless specifically you want to know about, I think, the guy's behavior in certain
Hmm.
situations, and that's why you're asking. You want to get a reading on how he behaves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. Here's another one. Where do you see us being the key word in 5 years? Or where do you see us down something that applies perhaps
Mhm.
more to our age group? That is again another topic that men sort of fear because now it's not about his future, but his future with you in it.
I think that's also a loaded question, and timing is everything. If you say
Yeah.
that on the second date, I mean, that's a little bit premature, obviously. I think a better question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if they seem to have like, oh, I want to be married and I want to live, on the beach or this or that, or I want to have a great relationship with somebody, you can get a better sense than where do you see us? If you've been with somebody for 6 months and you're over 50 and it's an exclusive relationship, maybe you want to broach that, but 5 years is a long time. Anything can happen in
Mhm.
5 years. I mean, maybe even like, where do you see us next year?
Yeah.
Where do you
Yeah.
see us together? Yeah, like, I mean, where would you like to live, or something like that?
It is a little bit of a juvenile question, though. Wondering what the future is or how he sees his retirement is, something we
Mhm.
want to know. But again, like you said, just depending on how you say it. Here's another good one. When can I meet your parents slash kids? Again, this was written for a younger audience, but good question. When can I, meet your family? Yeah, we might wonder about that, but that's a tough question too.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate question. Again, it comes down to timing. Again, if it's a
Mhm.
second date, that's a little bit early. But if you've been together for a bit, maybe a way of phrasing it is, I've heard you talk about your daughter. I would love to meet her sometime, dot, 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 see where it goes.
Mhm.
Because I think in a lot of these, when the guy feels like, okay, I'm being asked a question, I'm on the spot, a lot of times men don't like that.
Yeah.
So if there's a way of kind of just putting out the breadcrumbs, a lot of times they'll go for it and they'll give you the information you want to get. Don't necessarily ask them a question that makes them in a way that makes them feel like they're on the spot.
Yeah, I agree. And then they give a good suggestion here. Actually, it's bring up meeting your family. Like, I'd really love you to meet my kids.
Mhm.
And just make it okay to go there versus
Mhm.
asking about his, and then see
Yeah.
how that goes over. But that is a big step. And if you plan on being serious with someone, you need to kind of know fairly early whether or not there's going to be issues with
Mhm.
families, especially with kids.
And it can be very polarizing too, because kids can be the magic. Because if
Right.
everybody gets along, like in terms of like your relationship, Silka sounds like it's fantastic with you
Yeah.
and Paul's kids. In other situations, kids can be kryptonite to the relationship. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that's how it is because they might have some resentment. This isn't
Yep.
my dad. This
Mm-hmm.
guy's an a-hole. Whatever they
Yep.
want to project, it
Exactly.
becomes a reality that somebody has to deal with, and then it's just an extra hurdle to get over
Right.
when you're trying to make a connection when you're over 50. And sometimes it's a hurdle you don't want to have to deal with.
Exactly. And we did a whole video on that about dating with adult children. I'll link to it because it is a really, really important and interesting topic, I think. Here's the question that I just started laughing when I saw this. What do you want to do slash eat tonight? That this question seems both simple and logical, but it can blow up and create unnecessary tension. Yes. Do you know how many times this has blown up? We Paul and I have argued about this. I'll ask him, well, what do you want to eat tonight? What do you want me to make for dinner? He goes, God, can you just do what I mean? And it's like, God, I'm just asking you what you want. I mean, it must be horrible to have someone who will do whatever you want, for dinner. And then I just don't want to think. I just don't want to think. So when I saw this on a dating advice article, I told him and he just started laughing. So it is a thing, apparently. What do you think, Robert?
I understand that. I think it's hilarious. For me, it's not a
Yeah.
thing. I feel like with my wife or whoever my partner is, if they want to cook something, whatever they feel like making, it's going to come from a place of love. And instead
Mm-hmm.
of, if I have a special request, I'll say something once in a blue moon. But otherwise, at least in my relationship with my wife, she likes to do the cooking. She's an excellent cook
Mhm.
because she'll say, "What do you want to have for dinner?" And I'll say, "What do we have? What do you feel like making?" This is just life. If you can't say to your partner, "What do you feel like doing later?" or "What do you feel like eating?" I mean, that's a very natural question. So
Mhm.
I don't see any reason, with all due respect to Paul, to get upset about that, particularly if the other person's doing the cooking for you.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I was coming from. Apparently, we're not the only ones. And what he says, he goes, just do, just you make a decision. I'm just happy with whatever you bring. I just don't want to
Okay.
have to make another decision. And so I kind of started doing that, but it's really uncomfortable for me to say, this is what we're having for dinner, because I wasn't raised that way. So I want to hear from our audience. I want to see if this is unique,
Mhm.
or if you go through this as well. Apparently, as I said, it's a thing. So,
I mean, wow. Last point on this. Like, I'm thrilled if I get asked, "What would you like for dinner?"
yeah,
Uh, like, do I get to pick? I mean, when I was a kid, my mom was like,
yeah.
"Wednesday, meatloaf. That's it." Having like, "Gee, what do I want today?" It's not like a big problem. That's kind of a nice problem to have, that I can choose what I want to eat and have somebody
I,
make it for me, if
I'm
that's the
with you.
case.
I'm with you. I'm with you. What can I tell you? What can I tell you? Here's another one that, yeah, I can see where you wouldn't want to answer this. Do you think she's attractive? Like,
Ooh.
if you're either watching TV or somebody walks, again, why? I think we need to ask ourselves first, why are we asking this question? Like, what's the purpose behind that question? But women do this. What do you think?
Well, I think when a woman asks that question is because they think the other woman is a threat and is good looking, and they want to see what their partner has to say and how he's going to handle that. That would be
Mm-hmm.
my guess. I could be wrong. Now, if you're a guy, you're in a lose-lose situation where if you say no, then she realizes you're BSing her. If this is a woman who that your girlfriend or partner thinks is hot and you say no, then she's like, "What?" And then if you say yes, then why is she better than me? Is he like that type and I'm not that type? So it's like that is a question guys don't really necessarily want to hear because they're just going to get themselves in trouble.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And women should, it's like, think about why you want to know this. They say here that unless you're really asking this only for, out of a people watching thing, and maybe this woman is wearing something odd, do you think that's attractive? That's different, but okay, fine, ask. But again, for me, that would trigger all kinds of jealousy, potentially. Here's one that kind of threw me a little bit. I hadn't heard, but I would guess that this might cause some concern. What's your credit score? Have you ever heard that?
I think it's actually a fun question, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a good information to find out if your partner, when you're over 50, you need to have a you want to know where your partner stands financially because we
Mm-hmm.
live in the Western world and the
Right.
money is the fuel that we we operate on.
Yeah.
So you want to get a sense as to if this person credit worthy or not, and maybe there's a fun way of asking that. If you make it like it's an interview question or it's an application for the job, what's your credit score? Like you want to get a loan for an automobile. That's not good. If
Yeah.
you can serve it up in a light way to figure out, or you can talk about your own credit score, like, wow, I just got my credit score back and it's 820 or something like
Right.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and see how they react.
That's a good idea. The credit score, it's kind of a clever question because it does reveal a lot,
Yeah,
and
it is what it
it's
is.
some it reveals exactly the truth, especially if it's low and they're wasteful or whatever. Sometimes it's because of, I mean, there's a lot that a credit score says. So I see where that's a clever question when it comes to finances, but I can't imagine ever asking that. Of course, again, I was raised German and you never talk finances or income with anyone. So
Mm,
again, this is a good question for our audience. What do you think about that?
mm, hmm.
When you want to know about financial stability or viability in a relationship with this person, is this a good question, or
Hmm.
what would you
Cool.
recommend? Yeah. Another good one here. Do you think we have enough sex? The way I just said it, I wouldn't ask it. Do you think we have enough sex? What goes into that one? Why would you ask that? That leaves it wide open for the man to interpret one way or the other, and you're sort of attacking his sexual prowess. How do you feel about this one?
Well, as a guy, if I've never been asked that question, I'm not saying that means anything, but I would, if somebody asked me that, I would think, oh, they want more sex.
Hmm.
That would be my gut reaction, my visceral reaction to that, instead of like, how much sex should we be having? I don't think they would ask that if we were having too much sex. But if they
Hmm.
say, are we having enough sex? That sounds to me like a roundabout way of saying, I'm not getting it enough, buddy.
Yeah. Right.
So if that's the case, well, how do you respond? Then it's go time, buddy. You got to dial up you got to dial up your game, or maybe you're not compatible. I don't know. It all depends on the situation. I usually don't hear men complaining about, "Oh, God, she's killing me." You don't hear that much. It can happen, and I've
Yeah.
been with people who like they're just nonstop, but it's I think it's more of a concern if you're a guy to be
Hmm.
asked that question. It's like, am I delivering?
The whole thing with mismatched drives they
Yeah.
quote here is it's troublesome, so you have to
Mhm.
really put some thought into that if you're having sexual issues and you want to bring that up. But do you think we're having enough sex is probably not the best question. Robert, this is such a fun topic. we're
Yeah.
we're coming to the end. Anything you want to add on that? Do you have a specific question you
Yeah.
would never want to be asked?
I think the toughest question I was ever asked in a relationship, and I don't think I answered it the right way because there should be no thought. The answer should be yes. If you want to keep the relationship going, the question is, do you love me?
um, yep.
That's a tough one if you're a guy, because if you haven't both spoken those words to each other, having somebody that you're with ask you that question really puts you on the spot, and you have to come up with the right answer, which is yes, or you're going to be in trouble with that relationship. And I didn't immediately respond with yes, and that was the end of that relationship.
What a great question. That actually should have been
Yeah.
included. And I know women who've asked that. And that is like the worst. Yeah, I agree. That's probably the worst question to ask. So yeah, seriously think about that, because you're
Mhm.
probably not likely, probably not likely, yeah, to hear what you want to hear, because it is putting someone on the spot. So Robert, thank you for your time. As always, I will link to all of your information to your book. Very fun read. And of course, your radio show, Guys Guy Radio and Guys Guy TV, right here. And I look forward to seeing you again soon on Second Act TV.
I can't wait. Thank you, Silka.